Hey, it's Crappie Dan. We're out here getting positioned, getting ready to fish a brush pile I've got out here just outside this creek. But I came around into the creek and found that there was some fish activity in here and some fish. So we thought we'd come in here and scope it out before we go out there and fish the crappie that's on this brush pile. We've seen some fish on the graph, marked them, and so now we're going to work our way out of the creek, come out here and fish those brush piles, do it from a distance so that we don't spook those fish off the brush pile, and see if we can't catch a couple that way. And then as that slows down, then we'll work into the brush pile and get up close and personal with them and catch some big slabs. The way I approach a brush pile is I like to get at least 50 feet off the brush pile and take a look at electronics and see if the crappie are still on that brush pile and see how they're positioned on the brush pile. The time of the day and the sun makes a difference as far as what side of the brush pile they'll be on and what part of the brush pile they'll be on. So as we get 50 feet, put the trolling motor down, start casting some baits out there to them, just put it past it, let it arc into them towards the fish, and see if we can't catch some of those fish while it's arcing in, or that we're reeling it past those fish. If that doesn't work, or we catch the fish and the activity stops, we will then move up on closer to the brush pile and see if we can pitch them, see if we can vertically jig them, see if we can't get some of those fish that are buried into the brush pile. I'm going to look through the box here of Hyper Grubs. This is by Bobby Garland. Superb baits for casting, superb baits for jigging. What I want to do now, I'm within 30 feet of the brush pile. So I don't want to get on top of the brush pile, so I'm going to cast to these fish, and I'm going to use a Roadrunner head, and we got dingy water, high sun conditions, so my go-to bait is normally going to be either a white color or chartreuse in white. So what I think I'm going to do is take and get a white with a little bit of sparkle in it, as you see here, a pearl or like a green flake in it, has little purple flakes in it, reflects off the sunlight as it goes down the water, makes it look like scales are falling off of a shad as it's going down there. So I'm going to start with this bait. Great bait for dingy water like we've got here, but I'm going to mix it with a little bit of chartreuse on this Roadrunner head so that I get the best of all worlds in two colors. And chartreuse is also a good color to put in the water, and I can always change it out and go to like a chartreuse sparkle like this right here. Awesome color for dingy water. I also like this in clear water too. It's just an all-around great bait, that color right there. But I'm going to start with a white and use the chartreuse and white Roadrunner head. I'm just going to feed it on the hook like you see here. Just push it up, snug it up against the base of that Roadrunner, and then put it over the little keeper, just like that. So now I've got the perfect bait with a lot of action off this tail. So it's high action. I have flash off the blade, so it's a gold blade, great in muddy water. I now have the chartreuse and white head, and I've got a sparkle body, so it's going to look like a shad that's just falling right in her lap. Come up here and eat this bait. So we're going to cast this bait just beyond the brush pile. So it doesn't matter if you have a lot of electronics or whatever it's necessary. You can have something very elementary and find your brusher, or I'll have your brush pile marked it, and then go in there and cast to them. We are within casting distance of the brush pile. I like to stay at least now at this point 15 feet out away from it at first, and so we're going to cast to it. We're going to bring these casts just past either our marker buoy or where we have found these, the waypoint for these fish. Start at the base and then work your way up. This is midday, afternoon, and so they're going to be deeper than it would be in the mornings. So I'm going to cast. I'm using a B&M Leland TCB rod. I'm going to do a stop and start motion, which will let that bait rise and fall. And I'm using 6-pound line on this for great presentation with that lure, and just using a slow retrieve coming back through that. Now I was to the right of the brush pile with that cast, and I didn't get any strikes coming through it. So what I'm going to do now I'm going to go just a little bit closer to the brush pile, and I'm going to try right over here and let that bait drop and let it drop to the bottom. Sometimes they'll hit it on the drop like that, so if you're in the brush pile with the bait or near the brush pile, a lot of times as it drops next to it, you'll see your line just jerk. And when that line jerks, that's when you just want to start hook the fish, start reeling that bait back, and get that fish in. So we'll just try a couple times here, and then this will be very effective for you. If these fish are active, we will catch them. And there's definitely fish on this brush pile in this color of water, in this water. So I'm going to come right over here, because there's two brush piles in here. Seeing the fish on all of them. And now it's dropping. And we're in about 18 feet of water. Oh, I had a tick there. There he is. Got him. There we go. This is how it's done. We got a fish right now on. There we go. Bring that fish in. And we've caught him on Roadrunner with a hyper grub, chartreuse and white, and fishing your favorite brush pile. I'll work that back. There's another one right there. Got him. There's number two. Now, if you don't think they didn't want that bait and it wasn't an effective bait, take a look where that bait is. It's all the way down in his gill plate in here. So I can get that bait out. Well, we tried repositioning, so now we're going to change baits and we're going to try something new. And we're going to split shot an itty bit, and this is a brand new itty bit, and we're going to cast this beyond our brush pile that we've been fishing. So when they stop biting the bait that you're on, both from different angles, you can still stay off the brush pile, try something new. What we've done is downsized to a smaller bait and a smaller weight. We're going to split shot it to help get it down there to where the fish are. So we're going to cast to this like we were casting with the other, but this retrieve will not be a full swimming back. We're going to do it a little bit slower, and we're going to catch fish. That's perfect. We fished around the brush pile and we took the different angles. We stayed off the brush pile, caught a few fish, got in a little bit closer, caught a few more, changed lures, repositioned again, changed color, and we caught a couple of fish that way. So the idea here is that when I approach a brush pile, I'm going to try it from a distance and catch the fish I can, and then get closer as I catch or not catch fish. And when I'm finally done, I may have caught 5 off a brush pile instead of just catching one by disrupting the fish in the brush pile. Try it on your home lake, and try it the next time you go out so that you can fill your limit for crappies.
My favorite method is casting for crappie. I like to cover more area. If I'm fishing straight down under the boat right here, I'm only in one little tiny area. So only that crappie I get to right there is the one that's going to get to see the lure. When I'm casting it out, I can bring it across the brush pile. I can cover a lot more area so I can get my lure in front of a lot more crappie. So at the end of the day, I end up catching a whole lot more fish. There's a lot of things that go into casting for crappie though. There's the type of line you use, the type of rod you use. You can use anything, but you can make it a lot better for yourself. And it's all about being able to feel that little tap. So I try to put everything in my favor. You have to develop a feel a little bit. You want to be able to learn so you don't get hung up so bad. You want to be able to learn when your line hits a limb, so that you can draw a picture in your mind about how that brush pile's laying out there, where that limb's at, so you know when you're getting pretty close to it, you can feel your line hit it, or bring it up over it, let it fall. Those crappie most of the time are positioned just under those limbs. Biggest part of the time. So when you feel a limb, if you're bringing it over, you want to work it over the limb and then immediately let it fall, because 90% of your hits are going to be as it comes over that limb and then it starts to fall. Now I can cover casting. I can cover a lot of limbs. I can cover a large area, and I can just go any direction. I can cover the whole thing. So like I said, at the end of the day, I'm going to catch a lot more fish. Well, I want to be able to fish a crappie lure really, really slow, just barely moving. And this little tiny paddle on the back of this thing, if you move that the slightest bit in the water, that little paddle is just dragging like crazy. It's sending out vibration, and it's bringing the fish to it. So this is more for casting. This is what I'm doing. It works. The Baby Shad Swimmer works exactly the same underneath. It exaggerates the up and down, so those vibrations, it brings it to it. Then, when we get to fish to the bait, then it sees the color. Crappie is more color oriented than any other fish we can fish for. So it's something about the different shades in the water that they see that they're so tuned into more than any other kind of fish. Crappie, that's why we've got so many colors of crappie for crappie lures. Another thing you need to look at is when you're casting is the type of equipment you're using. I've got two different rods that I use. I call these breather rods because I can feel if that line touches a limb, the second it touches it, I can feel it. I know it's there. So it helps me not hang up so much. So that way I know the limb's there. I know to pull it up, lift it up and pull it up over that limb. I don't spend all my time hung up. So many times we've watched videos of it. I've been under the water, I've watched it. That fish will run up there and grab your lure and then spit it out, and you will never feel anything. Well, the more sensitive your rod is, the better you can feel it. The two rods that I use all the time because, and not necessarily whose they are, but because of how sensitive they are. I like a 6-foot rod. I'm a little taller. I can cast a little longer. I can fight them. Got more bend. I can fight them. And don't think you can't catch big fish on this, because my biggest fish so far on this little rod right here is 79 pounds. That's a pretty good fish. And that was a spoonbill. You snagged him accidentally. I don't want great big guides on it. I want just medium-sized guides so the line can go through it easy. But I don't want the weight of the guide to be pulling the rod down. And a lot of times when you're buying your equipment, if you look, the guides are heavy and it causes it to just loop over. Those guides are too heavy. Find one that's just got the medium-sized guides, and you don't have to get an expensive rod for that. They make some good ultralights that are not that expensive. You know, you have to $30, $40, $50, you can get a good one. Another key to your equipment is on your reel. And there are a lot of good reels out there. I'm not tuned with any certain reel. I just want one that's going to work good. In fact, I've got two different kinds of reels on the ones I've got, but they're really, really smooth. And it's all about reeling that as slow as you can, move that. If there are any catches in that reel, it's going to make you think you're getting a bite. This is a Phoenix rod. It is so light. The problem with it is if I cast way out there, sometimes it's so limbery it's hard to set the hook. But if that crappie even thinks about breathing on that thing, I can feel him, and I'm going to catch a lot more fish. Another thing to look is your line. I never use bigger than 6 pounds. I use a 4 to 6 pound test line normally, depending on how clear the water is. And if I'm using a little itty bit, I like to go down to the 4 pound test line. I use a fluorocarbon line because they cannot see the fluorocarbon line in the water. I'm trying to put everything in my favor. Another thing I do when I cast out is I talk about I tell the guys when they come with me, I said, I put a little English on it. Now there's a difference in when I tell people to do this, because I'll say, you need to just jiggle the end of your rod a little bit. Well, they'll jerk it a little bit, think like that. That's not what I'm talking about. When I say English is you got to imagine your lure in the water. Put it in a bathtub and look at it. If you just barely jiggle it like that, watch that little tail just jiggle a little bit. That triggers a bite. Now I'm not talking about jerking up and down like that. So if we sit there and give it a little jerk like that, now the lures are jerking up and down. That didn't trigger the bite. But that little bit of shaking in there does. So when I say put a little English on it, I'm just talking about just barely. You can see my hand right here. I'm just barely moving it. As I'm reeling it, I'll reel a little bit, then I'll just barely shake it like that. But when I barely shake it, that's when I get my bite. I'm going to show you a little bit about how I tie a lure on, because and it's very, very simple to do this. Always tie a loop knot of some type in this, because if you tie that tight, all these fancy knots, and you tie it down tight, if that line gets to the side of here, it's going to make it hang up and down like this. Or it may make it run like this. We don't want that. We want this to swing as free as possible. Simple knot. Is what I'm going to do is double the line. I'm just going to make a loop right there and run the jig through it. That's all I've done. I usually put my finger on the loop and the eye of the hook when I pull it down. That way I can get it down close to the lure when I pull my knot down. I'm going to wet it just a little bit so I don't burn it. Now I have a loop knot like this where it's just hanging free. Now this thing can move up and down however it wants to. It's going to travel in the water the most natural that it can possibly do it. I don't have anything tied tight to this. We're casting it, your lure will always run the way it's supposed to run. When we're putting a lure on, baby shad swimmers are really easy because this hook, you can figure it's going to come out at that cut right there where this little cut is in that bank. So if you put it in, put it all the way down and come out right at that cut, it's going to rig up there and it's going to be perfectly straight when you do it. The hook in the Crappie Pro head is exactly the right length for the baby shad to hit that right there. Same way, if I rig this little itty bit on this little tiny head right here, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to go down to the cut, come out, rig just as straight as it can be so that you can get the most bites, and we're going to have a great day on the water. So stay with a lure that has a little bit of action in the tail. Like I said, the baby shad swimmer, the slab hunter, and the itty bit swimmer. Probably the 3 top lures. In fact, that's 90% of the lures I use when I do those brands, because, and I helped design the lures. I did it for me. I did it because it works. And I'm telling you, it'll work for you too.